Shabbat Shalom. So, Ki Tisa and Jonathan Sachs' book about leadership. So, what did Jonathan Sachs pull out of this week's portion? Of course, there's probably a lot to pull out because there's a lot of examples of leadership, or in this case, the biggest example I feel is like failure. So, title of this chapter is How Leaders Fail. So, Jonathan Sachs, he defended Avraham. In one way, first of all, he said leadership is marked by failure. It is the recovery that the true measure is. It is the recovery that is the true measure of the leader. So it's recovering afterwards of that failure. Because as a leader, you're gonna fail. That's just the way it is. You can't always shoot 100%. You can't ever make every single free throw ever. You're gonna miss one of them. You know what I mean? You can try, but you're gonna miss it. But he gives these reasons why there's different types of leaders. Some are able to stand up against the mob. When everyone's saying yes, 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 they say no. You know what I'm saying? There's a certain kind of leaders, and everyone's like always pointing the finger at Avraham and saying, why aren't you that kind of leader? What's wrong with you? You failed. You gave in to the mob and all this stuff. But I mean, how many of us have tried to control a mob? They're pretty much uncontrollable. You know what I mean? There's very few leaders that can, and even those, sometimes even those leaders, even though they're opposing the mob, will still get shot down or killed or assassinated or whatever. There's many things that could happen to those kind of leaders. So my biggest, and Jonathan Sachs didn't even go about this, but my biggest defense of Aharon was God didn't even punish him at all. He didn't do anything to him. He just let him keep going. So if God's not going to do anything to him, why are we going to be pointing the finger and yelling at him, saying you're a bad leader? When God didn't do anything to say anything. And in fact, let him continue to be the high priest of the nation for the rest of his life, essentially. So, and that's I think the biggest defense of Aharon. And what Jonathan Sachs says was saying that there's multiple kinds of leaders, and that Aharon was the kind of leader that would follow the rules and would just do what he's supposed to do, essentially. I mean, he can't stand up to the mob, but he would still do what he needs to do, following whatever Hashem tells him to do. Kind of thing. And of course, Aharon, he blamed the people. So they were attacking me. Whatever. They wanted all this stuff, and it kind of makes you think back towards the beginning, with Adam and Chava, where they both kind of blame. Oh, I blame the woman, and then Chava, I blame the snake. So it's kind of a similar thing where, I mean, if the first man could do that, I guess Aaron could blame the people. And Hashem actually punished the people, the people who did wrong. Didn't necessarily punish Aaron for giving into them. So I thought that was kind of cool. So it's easy to be critical of people who fail the leadership test when it involves opposing the crowd. It's easier to be critical of them, but if you would look at your own, if you were in their place, could you oppose the mob? When a crowd gets out of control, there is no elegant solution. Even Moshe was helpless in the face of the people during the later episode of the spies. So I like that. It kind of gives an example. Even Moshe, who usually would say no, no, no to all the people, in that case, when the spies came around, when the spies came back and gave a bad report, he didn't just, the people were still afraid, and he couldn't, I guess that at that point he couldn't say no to them. I don't know. But it just shows that even he was susceptible to the mob. And there's one more quote I have here. There are times when you need someone with the courage to stand against the crowd. Others when you need a peacemaker. Moshe and Aaron were different types. Aaron failed when he was called on to be a Moses, but he became a great leader in his own right in a different capacity. Aaron and Moshe complemented one another. No one person can do everything. So that's the parting thought is, as a leader, thank Hashem that He's actually blessed us all with multiple leaders and not just one person. I mean, in our families, we usually have the wife and the husband, and one or the other will be the Moshe type leader, and the other one will be the Aharon type leader. And it kind of happens that way, at least in the couples that I know. It seems like there's always this kind of good balance between the two spouses. They're not both Moshes and they're not both Aharons. There's always like one that's one that complements the other. It's a blessing. And so if you do that, see that in your spouse, don't look at it as a negative thing. Maybe look at it as a positive thing, as they're being a Moshe or they're being an Aharon, and instead of like, oh, they're just being wimpy or they're being too mean. Whatever it is. So that's my parting thought. Continue to press on, be good leaders, continue to learn, and continue to follow the Torah and Yeshua as our example.